Alright, so welcome everybody and thanks for joining us for tonight's Answer Chicago meeting. My name is Imelda and I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. The title of our meeting is called Hugo Chavez, Presente, Venezuela Needs Our Solidarity Now. The agenda for tonight is as follows. We're going to have two presentations and then open the floor for discussion. At the end of the meeting, I will make several very important announcements. There are quite a few, so just stick around. But before we begin with the speakers, I'm going to read a brief statement from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, a member of the Answer Coalition, on the passing of Comandante Chavez. So this was addressed to Nicolas Maduro and the people of Venezuela. To Comrade Nicolas Maduro and the people of Venezuela, it is with the profoundest sorrow that we in the Party for Socialism and Liberation in the United States learn of the death of Comandante President Hugo Chavez Frias. Words cannot describe the enormous blow and loss that we, along with the Venezuela and Cuban masses and the revolutionary peoples of the world, suffer with his passing. Chavez's determined will to win a new Venezuela transformed not only your homeland for the betterment of the people, it also opened the road for a united and sovereign Latin America and the Caribbean. In these sad moments, we are remembering Chavez's youthful spirit in 1992 as he courageously took on the old regime to vindicate the people and thus lit a revolutionary flame that can never be extinguished. His humble roots, devoted love for his people, determined will for justice, and political acumen forged a revolutionary spirit in a man who never stopped fighting for Venezuela and a socialist future. His international solidarity gained many new alliances, so necessary in a world fraught with growing imperialist aggression. Chavez is gone physically, but his inspiration and example live on in the hearts of a combative Venezuelan people and all those who fight for true justice. Brothers and sisters, we mourn alongside you the irreplaceable loss of our dear Chavez. We extend our fullest solidarity to you and your comrades as you work arduously to defend and extend all the gains that Comandante Chavez inspired and fought for. We have complete confidence that the Venezuelan people, workers, peasants, students, indigenous communities, women, soldiers, intellectuals, those struggling for a socialist and sovereign Venezuela will win. Compañero Maduro and the government of Venezuela, we wish to assure you our revolutionary support and commitment to defend the Bolivarian revolution within the United States as we also continue our fight for socialism at home. Thank you. So let's welcome our first speaker, which is John Beecham. He is the coordinator of the Answer Coalition in Chicago. So welcome, John.
Thanks, Imelda. I would like to thank Jesus and Rixio for joining us from the Venezuelan consulate here in Chicago. And it's always good to see you guys. It's always good to work with you. And solidarity for the Venezuelan Revolution is very important for us as an organization, the Answer Coalition in general. And in a very concrete way, this is not very complicated. What's happening in Venezuela is very much needed in the world right now. It's very much needed, especially from the perspective of the poor, of workers, of revolutionaries, and progressives. Because we are living in a time where the country that we're in right now, the government that we're living under here in the United States, is using its vast resources, at least those on top and those in Washington are, in order to raise its level of violence and plunder against the people of the world. I mean, what is it exactly that the Obama administration has against Hugo Chavez? And let's be specific about this. The Obama administration issued not one word of condolence on the passing of Comandante Chavez. And why is this? The vast majority of Venezuelans have proven time and time again that they were with Chavez and that they're with the revolution. So you have the vast majority of Venezuelans who are with Chavez and the revolution. But you have the United States not only offering no condolences, but actually using this as an opportunity to try to go on the offensive and to attack the revolution, saying that they'll, quote unquote, help to pursue democracy and human rights in Venezuela. Well, that's a joke. Yep. Hugo Chavez is probably one of the, if not the leading humanitarian of our of the last few decades in the world for what Venezuela has done. Not for what he has said, not for what the Bolivarian Revolution has promised, although that's super important, but for what Venezuela has done. Millions of people have received medical care. They never would have received medical care before the Bolivarian Revolution. Millions of people learned how to read in Venezuela that never would have learned how to read. And the poor and disenfranchised in Venezuela have been empowered more than they ever have. And not only has this led to a transformation of the people of Venezuela, especially the poor and workers, but it's led to a sweeping transformation of the expectation of poor and workers all over Latin America, and even here in the United States, and in the Middle East, where Chavez is a hero. He's a hero because he was about his homeland, he was about his people, which he never saw as only Venezuela. He saw his homeland as Latin America, and he even extended that to the Middle East. When it was difficult to do, when no one else, hardly anyone else was doing it, when the U.S. went on the offensive against Libya and then Syria, when Israel went on the offensive against Palestine, Hugo Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution stood with the people who were under attack. Hardly anyone else did that. Iran's under attack. Venezuela stands with Iran, and Venezuela has reached its arms out to Iran in a spirit of brotherly cooperation in order to try to stop U.S. imperialism from overthrowing their government and taking over that country. So when we talk about Hugo Chavez or we talk about the Bolivarian Revolution, we're talking about something very specific and very concrete for the people of the world. And the continued existence and the forward march of Venezuela and Latin America are important for us here too in the United States. In fact, they're important for the people all around the world, because of the fact that under the most dire circumstances in the world right now, Venezuela has forged a new path. And what was the main force, what was the main energy that has, or what is the main energy, because the main energy is still in existence, that has provided the impetus for what's happened in Venezuela, the very significant things that have happened in Venezuela? Well, we just have to look back to the coup of 2002 for our evidence of what provides the energy. It's the poor and disenfranchised of Venezuela. It's women, it's people living in the slums and barrios, it's the indigenous, it's LGBT people. The majority of the population, which was kept out of the fruits of the Venezuelan economy, that's beginning to be able to share in those fruits. That is the energy of the Venezuelan Revolution. And why do I point this out? Because that's what, in a time of economic austerity and imperialist aggression, is the missing equation. Is struggle that combines leadership that is courageous and self-sacrificing with the energy of the poorest and most disenfranchised of the population in motion to take on their oppressors. I mean, that's not an insignificant thing, sisters and brothers. It's not happening it does happen all the time everywhere. But the specific relationship of forces in the world right now are not necessarily on the people's side. And that's why the United States is spending billions of dollars to try to stop, halt. That's why they spent billions of dollars trying to overthrow Hugo Chavez. That's why they're going to try to use the election in order to stop the revolution. They're not going to be successful. That's why they're spending billions of dollars doing that. Because right now, they want to do everything they can to stamp out resistance. We can see that in their attack on Libya. We can see that on their attack on Syria. We can see that in their further aggression against the Palestinian people and so many others. And this aggressive attack can only be beaten back by not just the example of Venezuela, but using the example of Venezuela. I mean, Che once said that we need 1 million. How many? He said we need 100 Vietnams, 1,000 Vietnams.
2, 3, many.
Yeah.
We need,
as many as possible.
We need as many Chavez as possible, and everyone in this room can be Chavez. We need as many Bolivarian revolutions as possible. In fact, we need a Bolivarian revolution right here. And that's how we feel like we can aid the people of Venezuela and Latin America the most is we take on their enemy, who's our enemy too. I mean, we don't have to look that far. Look, the Bolivarian Revolution, it gave healthcare to people who never had access to healthcare. It gave education to people who never had access to healthcare. The revolution is building homes. The revolution is building a socialist organization of 7 million strong. Here in the United States, we don't have to look any further than our mayor. Our mayor supports the oppression of the people of the Middle East. He's a pro-imperialist. He's closing medical clinics. He's cutting health care. He's closing schools.
Yep.
That is the path that U.S. imperialism is on. They're on the path of taking the things away from us that we have fought and died for over decades. Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution was on the other side of that equation, and he never shied away from taking on imperialism. And I think he had a very specific conscience even. He knew that what was holding back the Venezuelan nation and the Latin American nation from uniting was the elites that are hanging their boots right over the people in each of those countries and their networks and their militaries, but the fact that the United States finances and supports them. If the United States wasn't supporting the Venezuelan elite, they'd be aside right now. The Venezuelan elite has very little chance of surviving the revolutionary process without U.S. imperialism coming in and intervening in the situation. And Chavez was very specifically, I think he was very specifically aware of that, and we should be aware of that too, that the thing that's holding back us as a people, not just here in the United States, but in Latin America and beyond, is the system we live under here in the United States, where they close health clinics and hospitals in the richest country in the history of the world. We are sitting on more resources, more technological know-how than has ever been, for lack of a better word, sat upon in the history of the world. We can feed everybody. If Venezuela can have the programs it does, if Cuba can have the programs it does, if other countries, poor countries, can have the programs that it does, liberating the vast resources of the United States from Wall Street, who are the same people that are trying to overthrow the Bolivarian Revolution, well, that's the path forward. For us, that's the path forward. And the path forward is the path forward in the united struggle. Wherever the people are struggling right now, and hopefully they're struggling in the most organized and efficient ways possible, and hopefully they take state power. The fact that the Bolivarian Revolution and Hugo Chavez and the coup in 2002 kept state power, we're for workers and poor people having power. We're for workers and poor people all throughout the world having power. If the people of Chicago had power, and we just talked about it amongst ourselves for 1 second, we'd be opening more health clinics. We'd be fixing the schools. We'd be fixing the roads. We wouldn't let poor children on the south and west side live like they do. If the people had the resources and if the people had the power to carry those things into action, well, to us, that's what the Bolivarian Revolution signified. And why it's super important right now that we all do whatever we can to stand in solidarity with Venezuela. It doesn't look like the U.S. and the elites in Venezuela are going, and I know maybe Jesus is going to talk more about this, will be victorious in this election, but they don't care about the election. To them, the election and the death of Chavez is just a pretext to get what they're after. They want to smash the gains of the people. They want to smash the gains of the poor, and they want to take that back to themselves. That's not progressive. So whatever we can do to help build solidarity here in the United States, and just put out this simple message that I've tried to put forward, right? That the path forward is for greater access to the planet's wealth, and greater access for the poor and working people, and for poor and working people to struggle against their oppressors in order to have access to it. If there's one thing that we want to talk to people about, is that something we should be for. And we should be for the Bolivarian Revolution. Not only that, because that government is willing to give cut-rate heating oil to poor people here in the United States. The Venezuelan government is willing to do that. The Venezuelan government was willing to send help here during Hurricane Katrina. The Cuban government was willing to send help here. For what reason? In hopes that they would get something out of it? Well, maybe international solidarity. That's something worthy of getting in reciprocation to our actions. And so, whatever happens in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months in Venezuela, we should be on our guard. We should be ready to raise our banners in solidarity with the Bolivarian Revolution. We have a firm conviction that the people of Venezuela, the manner in which they're in motion, that they will be victorious, and that one day too here, we will also be victorious. Because the vast amount of wealth that a tiny fraction of the world's population is trying to hold on to right now, they can't hold on to it forever. And Chavez's legacy will live on, and he will definitely be a historical hero in the future when we have won. But he is definitely, right now, someone we should hold up as an example, because he's one of us. Chavez doesn't come from, he's one of us, right? He's an example of what we all can do, what we all can do together, and what we'll all continue to do together until imperialism is a thing of the past. It's imperialism that needs to go. It's imperialism that needs to be overthrown, not the Bolivarian Revolution.
Thank you, John. You kept it under time. Excellent. So our second speaker this evening is Jesus Rodriguez Espinosa, and he is from the Venezuelan consulate in Chicago. So welcome, Jesus.
Hi guys, how are you? My name is Jesus Rodriguez again. I believe that I know most of you, but for those of you that don't know me, I've been working as Consul General here in Chicago for the last almost 4 years, I believe. And I just wanna talk about 4 or 5 important things that I believe that are relevant for this audience. And I want to try to not to talk too much in order to allow questions and answers that I believe is going to be better than only one person speaking. One of the first things that I want to tell you, or at least talk about, is about Chavez's death. I mean, about the event. And for a lot of Venezuelans, that was like, I was mentioning that to some people, it was like losing a relative, someone from your family. I mean, at least that happened to the Chavistas. And even though we knew that Chavez cancer was something complex, we always had the expectations of something miraculous or something that's going to help him get rid of that. But when they announced, and that make us suffers a lot when they announced his death, because we were expecting him to wake up and start doing his things like he always did, with his strength and everything. So in that sense, what I want to highlight is that we were affected. Most of the Chavistas were very affected in the emotional way during those days. But at the same time, and I believe that that's one of the things that, at least to me, was more impressive, was that big mobilization of people that in less than 1 hour or 2 hours after the announcing of Chavez's death, moved out of the street of Caracas by hundreds of thousands, I believe, and they basically colored Caracas streets with red shirts. I believe that I never see, and Chavez moved a lot of people in his meetings and everything. I never see a mobilization like that in Caracas. And when that happened, after a few minutes after something that you know that no one organized that, you see, oh, this guy is something, means something for all those people that are in the street, just trying to get a little bit close to Chavez's coffin. And at the same time, you see them crying like babies, but also with a lot of commitment and in not allowing to take anyone the gains that we have been achieving in the last year. So for me, was powerful, especially that same day when they announced Chavez death, because, and it's like a mix of things because I was kind of depressed, but at the same time I was like watching the legacy or the results of what we have been working for the last years in Venezuela, and I believe that inspired me somehow also. So in that sense, I believe that we have to be optimistic about what's going to happen in Venezuela, but of course we cannot be thinking that no one will try to take advantage of the moment to gain, as they just say right now. I mean, basically the U.S., but I'm going to talk about that later. But first, before talking about that and the electoral scenario, I want to talk about a little bit about the Venezuelan economy, because that's one of the things that they portray like the worst thing in Venezuela right now in the media, and I believe that there's a lot of lies. There are a lot of lies about the economic situation in Venezuela, at least the way they portray it here in the media. I mean, Venezuela has just last year finished with a GDP increase of more than 5%. And that's not because only of the, somehow it is their input comes from oil revenues, but it was because the massive, what we call Gran Misión Vivienda Venezuela. How do you translate that, Ricio? The housing mission that was launched a few months ago by Chavez to try to provide housing to the lowest income people in the country. And last year we delivered more than 250,000 new houses to Venezuela. And we are planning to keep doing that for the next 10 years, I believe. And I believe that the goal is to try to get 2.5 million houses to try to, in 10 years, to eradicate the housing problem that we had and we inherited in Venezuela from previous governments. So the economy is very wealthy. Actually, I believe that is overload because of that, that economic movement. Of course, we have problems. We have problems with inflation. And that's one of the things that they try to highlight the most also in US media and international media, I mean, right-wing media. But when you see the numbers, you can see that the levels of inflation before Chavez government, if you compare them with the levels of inflation during Chavez government, we have improved those numbers a lot. But of course, it's a problem, and we have one of the highest inflations in the region, and we have to recognize that. And even Chavez recognized it as a problem that we haven't managed yet. So I'm talking about economy because I believe that they has been trying to point the problem of ¿cómo se dice? Desabastecimiento.
Supply.
There's one word when you don't find something in the markets.
Scarcity?
Scarcity. Scarcity. They have been talking about scarcity, and that's something that I always say that is part of the opposition of the right-wing tool. Is in the toolbox of the right-wingers. Whenever we are in front of elections, they and their friends from the chain distribution networks that works and are private companies in Venezuela, they use it to try to create some animosity against the government. So that's happening right now. So I wanna let you know about that, but I wanna let you know also that when in these days people from those even private networks have been talking about that, they say that they don't understand why that is, what that scarcity is happening, because they have been distributing, they have been double or triple the production, the distribution, volume. So that gives you an idea of that there's something wrong happening there. Maybe it comes out of the networks, or maybe it happens also within the distribution chain, I don't know. But we have that problem. But in general ways, I mean, if you take those two things out of the equation, the economy of Venezuela is robust, it's wealthy. We have I mean, Venezuela relies a lot on oil prices, and the prices of oil are very good for us in terms of they are high. That's not good for you. I know that. but that means a lot in terms of the Venezuelan economy because most of the revenues that you gain comes out of the price of oil. So I don't see a very big economic threats for Venezuela besides those two things that they have been trying, scarcity and inflation. They have been trying to portray like and they also say that the government is kind of freeze or something. That's a big lie also. The government is operating normally in Venezuela, and we are still delivering houses and doing the things that we usually do. So I wanted to talk about that because those are the things that you might read in newspapers or in the media, in the TV or whatever. And the third point that I want to talk about was the electoral scenario. I mean, we are going to have elections in 3 weeks. We are prepared for that already. Even in the consulates, we're going to have elections in 3 weeks, and that's a lot of additional work for us because we have to deal with all those Venezuelans, not very progressive, that live here in the U.S., but they have the right to vote. And that's absolutely valid in a democracy like ours. So we have to organize an election for them to express their hate towards the Bolivarian Revolution, and that's okay. But anyway, I mean, we're going to have elections in Venezuela, which is the most important thing, and all the polls are saying that Maduro is winning with at least 15% of, I mean, the margin of difference when Chavez won last election in October was, at least during the last months, around 10%. And at the end, the difference was like 11 or 12%. So right now, most of the polls are talking for an average of 15% of difference between Maduro over Capriles Radonsky, which is the guy from the opposition in Venezuela. I believe that it might be bigger, if you ask me, because I mean the difference between the Maduro and the real difference after elections. I believe that Maduro is going to win with something close to 20%, if you ask me, of difference. Of course, there are threats towards that election. I mean, and one of those threats are the possibility of the Capriles Radonsky candidacy to be withdrawn. I mean, people in Venezuela have been talking a lot about that. I mean, even Maduro and our Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Elias Howard, has been saying recently that they have information that maybe Capriles Radonsky received instructions from the U.S. to withdraw before the elections to try to create some destabilization scenario or something like that. And I believe that's not going to happen. Even if that happens, I believe that I mean, right now a lot of people in Venezuela are talking that we have to give Chavez the 10 million votes that he always wanted. You know what I mean? Chavez, for the last two presidential elections, he always says that we need to win by 10 million votes. I mean, we need to have 10 million votes. I believe that even if Capriles Radonsky retreats and we show that we can have 10 million votes, that I believe that we are going to have it, voting for Maduro, we are going to give Chavez something that he always wanted. That's the way, at least, that Venezuelan Chavistas are thinking. And we are going to annulate whatever possibility of saying that because of the retreat, there's not legitimacy in Maduro's will. You know what I mean? So that's something that is happening in Venezuela, but that's one of the threats. I mean, the possibility of Capriles retreating, I mean, withdrawing from the elections. Of course, another threat is the U.S. intervention that has been escalating. in the last days. And our government has been saying it very clear. I mean, the first things, and John was mentioning something about that, is that even during when they announced Chavez's death, the first or the second announcement that they did, they were talking about that they were going to support Venezuelan people, whatever, and for a democratic transition. And people in Venezuela say, what kind of transition is this? I mean, the only transition that we are, promoting in Venezuela is a transition towards socialism. And people say it very clear in Venezuela. But those kinds of comments, those are coming from the State Department here in the US, has been raising a lot of alarms in Venezuela, among Chavistas, of course. Another thing that happened recently was that they caught two guys in Haiti with a suitcase with more than $130,000.
$300,000
I
cash.
hear 130, but let's Google
That's
it
what
anyway.
Howard said last time.
But I mean, and they actually say in the first declaration that money was going to Capriles' campaign. I believe that they changed that in the second statement that they give, but those things raise alarms in Venezuela. So those things are happening. The third biggest intervention was when the subsecretary, I don't remember her name, but she is the head of the hemispheric section in the Department of State. It's a woman, I don't remember her name. They just appoint her. Whatever, she says something like our candidate, something that basically you can translate that our candidate, our best possible candidate is Capriles. So she already saying what she wanted to be, who she wanted to be the next president of the. So those are interventionist declarations. Maybe people in the US are used to those things, but we in Venezuela have been trying to get rid of those things in latest years, and I believe that we have been able to let the US know that we don't want those attitudes toward Venezuelans. So another element which I believe is a threat is the possibility of promoting riots. Like something that happened 2 or 3 days ago when they sent some students to the Electoral Council in Caracas to protest for the non-transparency of the Venezuelan electoral system, which is
This is actually
crazy.
the Department of State person also questioned our electoral organization, and that march was actually spawned off of that comment.
Somehow, yes, somehow, yeah. So they sent those students to Electoral Council of Venezuela, and they didn't expect that they were Chavistas, not wanting them to protest, and there was some sort of clash between Chavista people and I mean, what I'm trying to say is that they are going to try to promote, riots like those ones in order to, because it's more than evident that they are not going to win this election. I mean, there's no chance for them to revert those tendencies that the numbers are showing. So that's absolutely impossible. So they are going to try to do something. That's something that maybe that we haven't figured out yet. But we have to be prepared to not allowing the media, especially the media, to try to portray something, I don't know, to use something to blame the Bolivarian Revolution and try to take advantage of that in order to discredit the government or to promote a foreign intervention, which is another possibility, and whatever. I mean, we have to be very careful of that. So those are the threats that we are facing right now in front of the elections. And the last point is that I want to talk about is about solidarity. and something that John just said about the solidarity with Venezuela, which is important for us, but I believe it's also important for the same U.S. I mean, in terms of showing the other face of the U.S. that sometimes in countries like Venezuela is not too visible. You know what I mean? The face of the good people, the people of goodwill, the progressive people in the U.S. that is not represented by the U.S. government. You know what I mean? So whatever form of solidarity is always very valued by Venezuelans because we feel that we are not alone in the world, I mean, but also, that's my perspective, we also, Venezuelans, see another face of the U.S. which is different than the empire and the bad guys from the U.S. government. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I believe that that's important too. But also, I wanted to talk about the solidarity not only with Venezuela, but with the progressive country in the region. I mean, I'm talking about Cuba, I'm talking about Ecuador, I'm talking about Bolivia, Nicaragua, the ALBA countries. And right now we're in the middle of a big discussion in the OAS about the Human Rights Council within the OAS. And right now, because of something that was promoted by Venezuela 1 year ago, when we announced that we're going to withdraw from that body. Yeah. Right now they are discussing reforming the human rights councils within the OAS. They basically are saying we don't want that council, human rights councils, to receive funding for certain countries that are not part of the agreement. And you know what country we're talking about. I mean, that didn't sign the Human Rights Act, but they behave because they provide the money, the budget for that council. They behave like the owners of that, even though they are not signers of that agreement. So right now there are discussions. Some countries, most of them ALBA countries, are promoting to move the headquarters of that council to another Latin American country that is signatory of the agreement, which have a lot of meaning. I mean, that council headquarters is in Washington, D.C. So things like that are happening right now, and those things has been promoted by ALBA countries. And what I'm trying to tell you is that also ALBA countries are affected by Chavez death. You know what I mean? I mean, the solidarity shouldn't be only with Venezuelan people. I mean, the solidarity should be with ALBA countries, with progressive. Even Argentina and Brazil are countries that you cannot call them socialist countries, but they has been very close to us. So I don't know. We have to figure out a way to try to promote solidarity towards those countries too. And those were the 5 things that I want to talk to you about, and I'm right now open to answer your questions and whatever. I don't know what is going to be the dynamic right now.
Why don't we have you answer questions? I'll give you a chair.
Okay, but we can be here. We don't need me alone. Yes, and maybe Rizzo can be with me. Can be support me. Because Rizzo is from the consulate, most of you know him.
So just so we can have some order, I'll take names and a round of questions, and then we'll let them answer, and then we'll go from there. And if I don't know your name, I'll ask it. So in the back, what was your name?
Well, my name is Lucia.
Lucia.
Yeah. What I want to ask you, I should say, how many Venezuelans live in the United States, and how many of those are possibly going to vote for?
I didn't hear the last 3 or 5.
¿Cuántos venezolanos hay en Estados Unidos?
Ajá.
¿Y cuántos de esos piensan que van a votar por Capriles?
Okay.
¿O cuál ha sido el porcentaje en el pasado, por ejemplo, en las elecciones pasadas?
Yo puedo responder eso, sí.
So
You
we'll
want me
take,
to answer
we'll
immediately?
take a
or-
couple questions and then you could,
Okay,
does that work?
okay.
And Sarah, what's your name?
Patty,
I'm sorry?
P-A-D-D-Y.
Patty, okay.
Yeah, I've heard that, like Chicago's the murder capital of the country, I heard that Venezuela has the unblemished, if there's a lot of murders going on, I want you to speak to that, whether that's a right-wing lie or if that's accurate.
And sorry, your name?
Bob,
Bob.
I want to know what is the percentage? Now you mentioned that in the last election, Comandante won by 10%.
12.
Okay, so what I want to know is what's the percentage of the opposition? You know, in other words, if Chavez got 60%, it's 40%. You know.
Okay, I can answer now.
Yeah, do you want to,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
we can, you want to stand?
Yes, if you want me.
So we can- we'll turn.
Okay, you correct me, please, if I miss something. I believe, at least the estimations that we, the embassy and the Venezuelan consulates in the U.S. have, is that we should have something close to 200,000 or 250,000 Venezuelans living in the U.S. We have a very small population if you compare with other, immigrant population, if you compare that with other Latino countries or with whatever other country. I mean, the numbers, the Venezuelans do not have this tendency that other countries to emigrate. It's something that is not associated to Chavez even. I mean, I believe that goes beyond Chavez. I don't know why, but whatever. I mean, the numbers are 200 or 200,000, 250,000 Venezuelans. I believe that in the U.S. they are registered for votes something close to 25,000, and they vote in all the Venezuelan consulates in the U.S. And the proportion of their political position are like, at least I can tell you from my consulate in Chicago, they are like 97% pro-right-wingers and only 2% of progressive Chavistas and Venezuelans. So we are minority here, absolutely. The other questions was about the insecurity in Venezuela. And that's a good point. I didn't talk, I was tend to talk about insecurity, like some of the problems that we have in the country, but because I was talking about economic, I didn't want to, but insecurity is a problem. It's a big problem. It's something that is happening in Venezuela, but not only in Venezuela, it's a problem that is affecting a lot of countries, not even only in Latin America, I believe that the insecurity is something that is affecting a lot of countries. And that's something that Chavez recognized like something that we haven't accomplished. And that's something, if you ask me, Jesus Rodriguez, the person, something that I don't understand, because we have been investing a lot of money in promoting education, in elevating somehow the quality of living of a lot of Venezuelans. But the only explanation that I find to myself is that that's going to come out some point, because those changes are not shown like in months, and you have to wait years sometimes to see the effects of the good things that the government is doing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I dream of that. But also, I believe, if you are, right now that you mentioned that Maduro is approaching in his electoral campaign, is approaching the issue very firmly, more aggressively than even Chavez did, if you ask me. Of course, Maduro is younger, is more like he can move forward, he can go to the barrios right now. Chavez did that, but for the last 2 years he was very complicated with his illness. So he has been doing even some electoral rallies in poor shantytowns, addressing the problem of insecurity and saying that he want to sit with all the gang members and let them know that we are not going to allow, we're going to have we are going going to be open to dialogue with them, but we are not going to allow to kidnap our country. So he has been showing a different approach to the security problem that we have that give me hope that he might address the problem better or something like that. So I believe that was the second question. Do you have something to add to that?
Pues, ¿cuál es el porcentaje de la oposición? Saber su...
Okay. The other question was about I believe that in the last elections of October when Chavez won, we had something like 42% for Capriles Radomski and 55% for Hugo Chavez, something like that. I'm not 100% certain, but it's very close to the numbers.
43 actually.
43 to Capriles and 55 to Chavez. Yes. Okay, we can go to the other round.
So we have other questions, or if people have comments, you can raise your hand.
Yes, you can be aggressive and sharp or whatever. I mean, if you don't like, soft questions.
Yeah. So, Boy, and then I'm sorry, what was your name?
Mark.
Boy, Mark, and AJ. Boy, go ahead.
So first, yeah, my name is Boy. I think one of the most pressing issue that happened after the death of Chavez is the election of the Pope. So I want to know what you're thinking about that, because I think for me it's a very calculated move to do that. I still remember when we have the first Pope John II. They used him to push the
try to get rid of the progressive countries in Europe.
In Europe, and then the collapse of Poland. So that's one. And then the other question is related to the economy. Before Chavez's death, there was a move to devalue the currency of the Venezuelan currency. Some people have questions on that.
Yes.
And then the second question on the economy is about what's the percentage of the trading partners of Venezuela in relation to like the US, Europe, and the third world countries or China. So those three. Thank you.
Mark,
Do you want to answer that one first?
do you want to?
No.
Okay.
There were several
because I'm
questions.
gonna
Do you want to go
forget.
there?
Yes.
Yeah. I think
Okay,
you
the
made a couple.
first one
Was it about the Pope?
was about the Pope. Yes, it's actually was talking with my wife, and I'm not very Catholic. I'm not very religious actually, but I'm very respectful of religious people, and I believe that Chavez was very true when he talked about socialism and Christianism. I believe that he really believed in that. Some people say that he used it for electoral campaign or whatever, but I really believe, right now more than ever after his death, that he was actually very in that move, and I respect that. Even though I'm an atheist. But I was talking with my wife a couple of hours ago in the car, and my kids were there, and I was telling her that I've been reading about that as a possibility. I mean, the election of a Latin American country, Pope in the Latin American scenario right now might be a very objective and calculated decision from those guys in El Vaticano that are not, ¿cómo se dice? No se chupan los dedos. Can you say that in English? Are not naive kids that are going out of the kindergarten. You know what I mean? I mean, those guys in the Vatican are very sharp politicians, and most of them, all of them actually, are right-wingers. So some people are talking about that. I mean, about the election of that new pope as a tool to try to get rid of the progressive governments in Latin America. The same way they use Juan Pablo II, I don't remember how you say it, and John Paul II, in East Europe during the Cold War, the last years of the Cold War. So that's a possibility, and I really believe that we have to be very careful of that. I mean, please have an eye on that guy because he's going to try to do something in order to accomplish the goals of the people that they represent, which is the right-wingers, the capital, and all the conservative forces in the world. So, in that sense, I don't have too much, even though I was somehow happy at the beginning because he's a Latino and you feel Latino yourself, we Venezuelans, you might feel like happy because you have someone with your Latino blood down there in the Vatican. You knowing how those guys behave, you have to be very careful. The second question was
The devaluation.
the devaluation. I forgot to talk about that, but somehow was related to inflation. But I mean, actually, I'm among some Chavistas that believe that when we devaluate, we are somehow playing the game of the capital. You know what I mean? But we have different opinions within the Chavista movement, and we have to respect them all. And I believe that we should be less, ¿cómo se dice? Permeable, less.
See, I'm on the other side of the argument. I'd rather we devaluate if we completely need to than they force us to devalue it ourselves. Or
I believe
force
that we don't have
inflation.
to do that. I believe that we have to be stronger to that. But sometimes you have objective. I mean, sometimes when in countries you are not dealing with your ideas, or you have objectives, realities that you have to deal with. And one of those realities is inflation. And actually, when I have this book that might cost $1 in Colombia, January last year, and with the inflation on Venezuela, this same book, by the end of last year, cost $1.2, and with the inflation of Colombia, that same book, because they don't have too much inflation, cost 1.001. You have the problem that everything that comes from abroad gets cheaper, and that affects your economy. You know what I mean? I mean, when you have a country with high inflation, you are going to be affected because the prices within your country are going to be higher than the prices from your neighbors. At least, unless your neighbors have the same inflation that you have. So what's going to happen? You are going to have a trend of promoting imports that affects your economy. So in that sense, I tend to accept the decision like an objective decision that sometimes you're going to have to take in order to try to avoid all the distortions that might be within an economy. So it's complicated, but the same inflation problem creates a devaluation problem somehow, because Venezuela is not an island, not connected to anyone. So it's complicated, but I am among those that believe that you better don't promote devaluations, because in the case of Venezuela, that have a big impact in prices. And automatically when you devalue the currency, you're going to have higher inflation. So we're going to have to deal with that this year. I believe that the government is doing it right, but I mean, in order to try to stop any attempt of taking advantage of the devaluation in order to increase the prices higher than they should be, and opening another sources of
Diversifying.
diversifying another. They basically create a new organization, a new mechanism that is going to allow producers to get another source of dollars in order to run their businesses, things like that. So that's going to help somehow the problem of the currency in Venezuela. So that's a problem. That's somehow a problem related to the inflation, and we have been dealing with that. I believe that even Chavez is not there. I mean, we have been taking measures in recent days and weeks that show that we are trying to reach and to control the problem. And I believe that eventually we're going to do it. But in a country that depends a lot on oil prices, that's something that is very common also. I want to tell you that, because some people don't talk about that neither. I mean, countries, oil-producing countries, are always affected by the inflation because of the fluctuations in oil prices. But that's more complicated to explain. But the third question was, there was another one.
Trading partner.
Yes, we have, as I was just mentioning, we have partners all over the region and all over the world. I believe that the first one is the US, still. Even though we have been trying to diversify that, I believe that the last year numbers say something that talks about 40 or 50,000 million dollars exchange between the two countries. I mean, we are like among the most important partners economically talking in trade with the US in Latin America. But we have been trying to diversify that, but that's not easy, especially in a country that was a colony of the US for almost a century. So it's not easy to do that. But we have been doing, actually, we have been increasing. 10 years ago, we exported like, I don't know, something like very ridiculous of oil to China, for example. And right now, I believe that we are close to 500,000 barrels per day. And I believe that we are still delivering to the US like 1.2 or 1.3 million barrels per day. I mean, those are, we have a big partnership in the region with Brazil right now, with Argentina, and right now we are part of the Mercosur, and we in Chavez fought for that for a long time, until last year when those events happened in Paraguay, and allow the rest of the countries in Mercosur to allow, by the democratic clause, excluding Paraguay for a while, to accept Venezuela within the Mercosur. And Chavez was very proud of that, because he really saw that that was a possibility for developing within our region. And Chavez was a big promoter of the Latin American integration, and I believe that's part of his legacy. So we have Brazil like a big partner. Colombia is another important partner in the region. The US, China. I believe that China right now is the second, if you ask me. The US is the first most important trade partner with basically because of the oil. And
Iran, Belarus.
No. In terms of trade, they are not relevant. Even though we have good relations with them, but in terms of trade, they are not the 10 more important countries. So that's basically the most important things that I can tell you about that. Another question? Yes.
Yeah, man.
Let's ask you again.
Yeah.
Somebody else? Okay, I'm Mark with Independent Workers Party, Chicago. And you know, you've got a good poster right there showing 56 U.S. military interventions in Latin America.
That's not mine, just in case, because some people might say, because I'm going to get in trouble if the U.S. Department say that I'm talking about U.S. because I'm a diplomat. My good friends from the Party of Socialism and Liberation put it there.
Okay.
Just in case.
Historical facts. I mean, the United States is, of course, a capitalist country, and they're, you know, you say that you're a socialist. Bolivarian revolution is pushing for socialism. Why then, after so many years, have you not overthrown capitalism? There is no, time is not on your side. And the capitalist class, when they're semi-deposed like they are in Venezuela, where they've had some of their assets taken away from them, that just enrages them and infuriates them. They're now planning on how they're going to get back into power. And as we see from this map here, they'll get back in power one way or the other. If you don't take power yourselves, if you don't overthrow capitalism and have a workers' revolution where the workers are put in power, if you don't take away the power from the military in Venezuela and put the working class in power, arm the workers, you're going to go down like what happened with Allende in Chile. You know, this is not something that the capitalist class is going to allow somebody to just toy with their rights to private property for any length of time. And the United States has just pulled all of its troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq. They've got 200,000-300,000 soldiers they can send down to Venezuela. I think it's quite possible that there are people in Washington that think they've neglected their backyard for too long, and things are getting out of hand down in South America. When are you going to overthrow capitalism? When are you going to arm the workers of Venezuela? And what is your plan to make sure that you're not going to lose everything you fought for and face a bloodbath in Venezuela like what happened in Chile in the 70s? If you lose an election, what kind of revolutionaries allow themselves to put the lives of the working class of their country at the risk of losing everything, including their own lives, because of an election, a bourgeois capitalist system?
I understand your. Let me go to this one first, and then go to yours, because this one is complex.
Do you want to switch, and I can take some questions, and you can respond?
No, I believe that I should answer this one first, or I don't know, whatever you want to do. Because
yeah, we can take a couple, and then we'll have you respond. So I had AJ, and I had Lucia, and Beth. Did you have No? Okay. AJ, you know.
This is more of a big picture question. I always view Venezuela as being a more contemporary beacon of light when it comes to revolutionary politics and revolutionary activism. It's like Cuba was in the 50s with Che and Fidel. With the fallen brother of Chavez, and then Fidel is limbo at this point. Where in Latin America and the Caribbean is going to be the next beacon of light in South America, Central America, or the Caribbean, in order to keep promoting revolutionary politics and activism, and kind of segueing a little bit from what this gentleman was talking about, what about the cooperatives in Venezuela? If the politics don't go the way you guys think it's going to go, what's going to happen to the cooperatives in Venezuela? Will they keep growing, or will they be more limited in terms of growth?
Okay.
Lucia, you had your hand up.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember if you said that Venezuela has the highest inflation rate in South America, or
The high what?
tiene
Yes, it's one of the highest in the world.
Wow.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, that was my question. The other one related to what he said, was overthrow capitalism in sense is much easier said than done, especially in Latin America. Because, well, I don't want to get into the dogmatic stuff, because I hate it anyway. No offense. But because the United States thinks that Latin America is theirs, simple as that. They think Venezuela's oil is theirs, and the possibility of intervention is very real. I mean, it really is. So I don't know if Venezuela can overthrow capitalism. I mean, I don't know. I doubt it. I'm a skeptic, by nature. So especially when it comes to Latin America, because we tried so many times, and the United States has never let us. And I'm talking about my own country, our own experience.
Are you
I'm from El Salvador. Okay, so the revolution didn't triumph in El Salvador because the United States didn't let us. Simple as that. If they hadn't intervened, it would be a different story.
Right.
But on the other hand, we are very small. We don't have oil. We don't have nothing. I mean, we have nothing except coffee, maybe. But anyway. So that's, and so what do you think? I mean, what are Venezuelans thinking about along those lines about how real is the possibility of actual, military intervention in Venezuela?
We'll let Stephanie and then we'll have you respond.
I just have a comment. I think that I want to thank you guys for coming to speak as well. It's been really awesome to hear about everything. Just, Venezuela isn't just a symbol of a country or people that are combating imperialism, but all the different movements. the women's movement, I mean, women here in the U.S. are being attacked right now. I mean, for a long time, but the women in Venezuela, you see, I mean, they're involved in every aspect of society. You look at the labor movement there, a huge example for us here. And just as an activist and a socialist, it's very easy from our country to say, well, come on guys, why haven't you overthrown capitalism yet? And as my sister here said, it's much easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
And living in the belly of the beast, we really should know, I mean, the U.S., especially U.S. imperialists, will do every single thing everything they can to squelch and to kill movements, not only here in the U.S., but abroad. And what is our responsibility here as activists, as supporters of Venezuela, as supporters of the oppressed, is not to tell another country this is what you should do, or this is how you should do it, but to be ready to be in the streets the very next day, the same day that our country intervenes or tries to intervene in the revolution that is happening in Venezuela. There are many different ways, and it's not up to us to say what a revolution should look like, but to support the movement and to support the forward-stepping and the incredible gains that the people of Venezuela, Chavez was a great leader, but the people of Venezuela have really fought for and moved forward with. Yes, do we want to see the people of Venezuela prevail? Absolutely. But we are, and we should stand in solidarity with the people of Venezuela, and not necessarily criticize or point fingers and say this is what you need to do.
Exactly.
You're helping me. I don't need help anyway. But anyway, thank you. I have friends that are Trotskyists, Maoists, Leninists, Socialists, whatever. I have all those friends. And I respect them. Stalinists also. I have Stalinist friends like you can find a lot around. And I believe somehow what she just said is something that I wanted to say. I mean, when you evaluate something from the dogma, from the theory, you can say a lot of things. You know, you can criticize, like you can do a checklist of criticism. And if you want to do that to Venezuela, you will have like 10,000 checklists if you ask us to follow the dogma as it is. But the truth is that we have been with our mistakes, because we don't say that we are perfect in Venezuela, that we have been giving power to people. I really believe it. Maybe it's not the best way, maybe it's not what was written in the 19th century or something like that, but it's something that adapts to our reality, and to our times. And I believe that you have to take that into consideration when you evaluate a country, because, we are not in the times of when Karl Marx wrote the manifesto, or we are not in the times when Fidel Castro and Che fought against the dictatorship of what's the name of the guy? Batista. We recognize that we are in different moments, in different places, and something that scares me when I hear that criticism sometimes is that I feel that sometimes that criticism comes from a supremacist perspective. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that scares me sometimes because the people that feel better than others are usually the ones that say, you have to do this, that, and that, because we have the truth.
Right.
And we know everything, and you don't know nothing because you are, and that's very non-constructive because the reality is that there's no truth and that there are different truths and the realities are complex and that you have to deal sometimes with different realities in different times, so it's not easy. Especially when you are running a country. We can have the perfect world ever sitting in this room and trying to build the perfect world. I recognize that, and I believe that that's why theory is important. I'm not saying that theory is not important. I believe that theory is important, and we have to use it as a tool to achieve our goals. But we cannot be kidnapped by the theory. You know what I mean? And going back to why I feel like that we are giving real power to the people is because I've seen those things. You know what I mean? I've seen people in Venezuela, in communal councils, feeling in power, even though sometimes they don't have anything in materially talking. You know what I mean? But just because they change in the approach from the government, change their life. And that's one small step to change reality.
For those who don't know what a communal council is, it's pretty much a local small government within your community with a communal bank even that receives funds from the government, and you create projects to improve your
and that's a creation. Locality. And that's a creation of the Bolivarian Revolution, of the Bolivarian Constitution approved in 1999. And that creation has been growing, and we have been creating in the for the last, I don't know, 10, 14 years, the framework for those concepts to operate. And we have been going forward than those banks that Rick just mentioned. We have been those enterprises that we nationalized a few years ago. Some of those enterprises have been transferred to communal councils, and we have been creating something that is different than co-ops. We have not abandoned the concept of co-ops, but we right now are thinking in something more, if you ask me, more advanced, that is giving the communal councils the means of production. I mean, we basically transfer the property of some of those enterprises that we nationalized a few years ago to communal councils. And they right now are running those companies. And I believe that if we keep that trend, we are going to have the possibility of having the means of production in the hands of the people, which are the communal councils. Communal councils are entities that are not connected even directly to the government. So you can criticize Venezuela. I can criticize it too. I mean, I've been reading some books, I mean, some theories, and it's not perfect, but I believe that we have achieved a lot, more than what some people might think in the U.S. that not has been, I mean, that haven't had the chance of going to Venezuela. And I'm not saying that it's perfect, but I believe that it's in the right direction. And I hope that we can keep moving that on. And if you ask me, I have good expectations in that sense. The only thing that can take us away from that is the possibility of a foreign intervention, which is true, it's a reality. We have it like that, and I just mentioned it when I talk about threats. I mean, there's a possibility of that. But don't believe that we are in Venezuela, and I love the Chilean people. I really love them. And all the Latino countries are for me the same country, but the Chilean are, I love them because they are very close to us in solidarity. But we are not close to the Allende government. We are very far away from the Allende government. It's different. Venezuelan reality is far away different from what happened with Allende, if you ask me. So, I'm telling you this because I believe that, I mean, there's people, and we don't have to publicize that too much, but we have been creating militias, popular militias. Those things exist in Venezuelan government. You don't hear them too much here, but those things exist. And also, there are people in las montañas. And they are not people, some of them are not with the government, but even though they are very aligned with our ideas, but they are there, just preparing themselves in the case something bad happens. Those things exist in Venezuela. We don't talk too much about that, but those things are there. Yes.
I saw something else that I was very happy and proud to see, was the overwhelming numbers of people who came to the funeral and their high level of intensity.
Yes,
and from my point of view, I think they scared the United States.
I think so.
Because it was so,
Yes,
I've seen a few video clips of Evita's funeral. And that level of intensity in terms of number of people and intensity of people, I think put more fear into them in terms of intervention, because they know they've got that many numbers of people that came from the countryside on the buses.
There's going to be people in Venezuela that is going to try to defend the revolution anyway in the case of a foreign intervention, but
I'm just saying,
we are confronting the biggest military power, so it's complicated.
That's true, but a military power also evaluates their enemy.
Yes.
And because there was such a large, popular, strong
that's a muscle. It's a sign that
right. But that is, and then you could put the flip side of it, the beauty contest that the women
that we have
that
20 years ago, and that's absolutely a big change. Because if you ask me, Venezuelans were seen for most of the Latinos countries, like some people talk about the stupid Americans. I don't want to, but they say the most about, the same thing about us. They say the stupid Venezuelans. They 10 or 20 years ago, if you ask some Latino that live here, they say the stupid Venezuelans because we were always thinking about Mickey Mouse and the beauty contest and things like that. And if you compare that reality with what we have right now, it's a big change. It's a big, and we have to take advantage of that in order to move forward. And I believe, I share your worries about losing what we have achieved and really achieving what socialism means. But I believe that we have to use different ways to do that. And we have to keep moving to do it the Venezuelan way, because there are no recipes for that. But just give me a question, 1 second, because there were another questions that I didn't.
I was thinking about answering.
Okay.
He wants to
Okay.
I'll trade chairs.
I'll try to do this. I think one of the, I think Jesus is correct. Every situation is different. Every revolution is different. You can't say Soviet Union, Cuba, Vietnam, Venezuela, Chile. And, they're all going to Chile because it's an example. They're all going to be the same thing. I think what is the case in Venezuela is that the coup, which has never really happened before, and it's the reason why I always talk about it when I talk about Venezuela. It's never happened in Latin America. No one's ever stopped a U.S.-backed coup before, where the people, literally the people, stopped the coup. It really solidified the government as a people's government. Chavez was pro-people and pro-socialist before that, but as soon as the people came out and restored his government to power, that Chavista Bolivarian vision to power, that really changed the relationship of forces in the country and in Latin America. So what you also do have is the danger to the revolution is real. It's the right wing, which doesn't get their power from their ideology. Their ideology by itself is disgusting and really, doesn't have any power behind it. Where they get their power from is the fact that they own.
Right.
That they own parts of the economy. And that is really the basis of the danger to the revolution. What the revolution has been successful in doing is taking parts of that economy out of their hands, of redistributing resources. And the fact that they've been able to take step after step by mobilizing the people in that direction is what really should give people outside the country a very serious hope that the revolution will continue, because it's the people themselves that have been mobilized, producing gains. That is the energy of any situation like that. Like, as long as you continue to go forward. Having said that, there's still a confrontation looming or underneath the surface. And the power behind the elite is Washington and Wall Street.
Yes.
And when the revolutionary forces are plotting strategy and tactics, which, you know, we should discuss. I mean, there's no reason why sisters and brothers around the world can't discuss strategies and tactics. We should, because that's our pathway to victory. But when they're figuring out strategies and tactics, they always have to think, what are we going to do about the entrenched power of the U.S. that is so powerful right now? I mean, if you just think about it, the U.S. launched full-scale interventions against Afghanistan and Iraq, faced determined opposition, armed opposition in both countries for a lengthy period of time, mass opposition in their center of power and around the world to the Iraq War, and we're still able over time to bring things, right, sort of into a situation where they aren't directly, where their empire isn't directly harmed. They've been able to take the promising Arab Spring in a lot of ways and use it to attack Libya and attack Syria. Again, taking world situations and using them to their advantage. And the reason why I say this is because our enemy is seriously powerful. And the strategies and tactics that Venezuela have developed, they're not only theirs, they're ours. Because they're moving forward, and we have the opportunity to continue to be in solidarity with the Venezuelan and Latin American revolution. Like, to me, that's living, breathing Marxism. The realization that in order to win, we need to remove the capitalists from power. We need to remove the imperialists from power and take their property and make it ours, and make it the whole people's property.
Yes.
That is what being a Marxist is. That doesn't mean that you can take power tomorrow just because I said that in a meeting. We're not going to take power here in the United States tomorrow. And no matter how much I lecture to workers, it's not going to happen. The key to being a Marxist as a living science is to figure out how to, for lack of a better word, to keep that flame alive, mobilize people and organize people so that we can achieve our victory. And we achieve our victory together. You know, that's why we have the approach we do to Hugo Chavez, to the Bolivarian Revolution. That's why we're holding this meeting tonight. That's what we hope to do when we hold a joint, when we ask the Venezuelan consulate here. We hope to together strengthen our struggle by, yes, understanding the situation, but marching together. I mean, that's our particular perspective, and we think that that's what Marxism is. And that's what, as a matter of fact, that's what Marx or Lenin or Che or Fidel or Ho Chi Minh or anybody else, I mean, that's what the success was. So then Marxism was a living science, right? It wasn't something that was just, it's not like the Bible. There's a real confrontation in Venezuela. That's a real struggle. The question is how to best aid that struggle, how to best be part of that struggle.
There were questions that I didn't answer.
Yeah, so it's like 7:40, so I think we're going to have Jesus finish the round of questions that we had taken, and then we'll start to wrap things up if that's okay with people. So I think we've kind of addressed some of them. It was the possibility of U.S. intervention, speculating on what happens if the right wing wins, and then the types of programs.
Okay. Just to, I believe that I already mentioned, talk a little bit about intervention. That's a big possibility.
Well, could I just add something before? I mean, ask some. What I'm curious is to the relationship of the military to the revolution. You know,
there's a close relation.
It is.
Yes,
so
make me feel optimistic if you ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what Allende said too.
Yeah. No, but it's different. Allende didn't have to deal with a coup d'etat 10 years before. It's very different. I mean, in 2000, what happened in Venezuela in 2002 and 2000, I'm not saying that they are not right-wing generals in the army. Of course, they are going to be there. But they are not in positions of control. I mean, I see that like a very, very remote possibility.
They should be in prison.
But of course, that's a threat, if you ask. That's true. But the Venezuelan military was decorated because of the coup d'etat of 2002 and all the attempts that came after that in 2002 and 2003, if you ask me. Yes.
In terms of tactics, one of the tactics that the right-wingers use is the question of race. And since Maduro is a person of African ancestry, to what extent will race play a factor in the upcoming election, and do you think they'll be able to successfully divide the Venezuelan people? I remember that shortly after the funeral, Capriles, whatever his name is, referred to Maduro as boy. And so you get the whole thing of the incompetent black man. So I'm wondering to what extent will that be a factor in the revolution? And the second point is, I know that Maduro says it is Chavez's hand-picked successor. Is he making any attempt to advance something different from Chavez, and if so, what is it?
Okay. In the first question, I believe that. I mean, first of all, let me try to answer the questions about cops. I work in the cops agency in Venezuela, and I was part of that big wave that happened during the first time of Chavez government promoting cops. That thing is not happening right now, if you ask me, but it's still alive. I mean, we have been abandoned. I just mentioned it when I was answering the other question. But we haven't abandoned the cops, but we have been focusing in what I mentioned what we call empresas de producción social. I mean, social-led enterprises of, I don't know if someone will find a better translation, but those are the ones that related to the enterprises that are in hands of communal councils, basically.
It's good to mention that there's also a lot of companies that are traditionally owned by the workers in the traditional way. And then there's this ones that are communal council owned, and then there are ones that are parallel to private enterprises too, which I don't know if you remember the very last presentation I was doing here, I had a listing of all those companies as well. So they've been progress in 3 different sort of directions, but they're all away from the private enterprises.
But if I may, does one help the other, or is one transition the other one out?
I cannot answer that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know because
I think there are 3 different, but like I said, they're moving away from the private sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yes.
Course, yeah.
Yes.
And I think by default they help.
I would like to answer your question, but I don't know, and I don't want to tell you something that I don't know, but I can try to find out. But going back to your question now, I can tell you that if you ask me, I don't see the electoral race right now associated to racial issues. Because racial issues in not only Venezuela, but in most of the Latin American countries are seen in a different way than the way they are seen here in the US. I'm not saying that they are not an issue, but it's not part of the electoral debate in a big way. Even though I believe that Chavez highlight or raised the Afro-Venezuelan, his Afro-Venezuelan roots a lot more than anyone has been doing that in Venezuela, and I admire him for doing that because that raised a big movement of Afro-Venezuelans that I believe is important. But if you ask me, what was the second part of your question? It was about the...
To what extent is Maduro advocating something different from what Chavez is?
Okay. I like to be always very frank. I don't like to say lies. And when I talk with some friends...
You're not a politician, huh?
Yes, I'm not a politician. I come from grassroots organizations. So basically, when I talk with some friends and I see Maduro's trajectory, I always talk to them some months ago that I felt like Maduro was too much in the center of the Chavista movement, if you ask me. Not very to the left wing of Chavista, or neither to the right wing Chavistas, just there in the center. And that scares me a little bit until Chavez started getting worse. until last December. And I start watching a different Maduro, which is understandable because before he was like just a minister of foreign affairs or vice president or whatever. But right now he is behaving in a different way, and I believe that he is more able to receive inputs from grassroots organizations that are the ones that push to the left. And if you ask me, in the last weeks or months, I've been watching a different Maduro, more tend to keep moving forward, trying to achieve all those things that we haven't achieved yet. So I'm optimistic about that, if you ask me, right now. But of course, I mean, it's complex. The reality is complex. We don't never know exactly what's going to happen. But if you ask me, I'm optimistic about him. The way I've been seeing him talking, the way I've been seeing him approaching issues that we have in the country, dealing with the opposition, the way that he has been speaking, I kind of like him. I believe that I'm going to vote for him. That's it?
Yep.
This is it? Did I answer something?
Just one quick
Yes.
question.
Yeah, I think we're going to see if anyone has any last questions before we start wrapping up.
Okay.
Okay, and the question is back to the communal councils. When I first heard you describe them, I sort of got an impression more like around neighborhoods and around but in terms of something that would coordinate and disseminate information, and it brought to my mind, having been in Cuba, it brought to my mind the committees for the defense of the revolution, yes, which are just a wonder to behold. When they deal with everything from pap smears for women to what's needed in the health clinic to what's in the grocery store. I mean, but they also are very much something that is a watch guard. I don't know what for what's happening in the neighborhood, to be aware and to communicate, which of course the right wing here in the United States paints it as thought police, but I mean it's very much, and I wondered if there's any similarity to those committees for the defense of the revolution.
I believe that we have been expanding the concept.
Okay,
I mean,
that's wonderful.
Make it go beyond that concept that you mentioned, that was somehow its origins. And also, you didn't mention that also in its origins, they were conceptualized like an entity that was organized by the people in their neighborhoods in order to solve their problems, to prioritize them, to propose projects to solve the problems in the community, and even to try to find financing for that. Right now, the infrastructure that I mentioned you that has been approved by Venezuelans in the last years make it. I always talk about the communal branch. A lot of people say that the new Bolivarian constitutions created, the two traditional branches and the what we call the electoral branch and what we call the moral branch. We start talking about 5 branches. The two more than the traditional branches that people know after the French Revolution. But I believe that the communal branches is a branch that is there. No one call it like that, but I love to call it like that because it has in fact become a branch, another part of the state that is there and has been strengthening in recent years and have taken those communal councils to councils like comunas, which is the association of communal councils for different neighborhoods in a city, and sometimes the association of those communal councils with communal councils from different cities. So it's something that goes beyond that. And right now, since 2008 or 2009, we have been talking about what I mentioned, las empresas de producción social. And in our plans in Venezuela, we have expectations that 1/3 of the property of the country will be in hands of those empresas de producción social by 2014. So we should be very close to that. And the other third should be in hands of private hands. That's what was in our plan for 2007, 2013. And the other third was in hands of the state. So my expectations are that 1/3 in our second socialist country that is running right now will increase, will be bigger. And at some point, I hope that represents the majority, not to say the totality, because I believe that's complicated, but the majority of the structure of the property in Venezuela. So that's how, yes.
Before we go on, I must mention, we have tons of DVDs, especially about the comunas at the consulate, if you guys want to watch documentaries from here, from Venezuela, from all over the world about Venezuela.
I'm not prepared by the government.
So,
I'm not propagandist. Sometimes some of those CDs and documentaries have been prepared by people that go to Venezuela. You have another question?
I'm just wondering real quick, is there anything that we could do in the United States to help support the people in Venezuela to fight imperialism? What would you recommend?
Solidarity. Being aware of the manipulations in the media, trying to not believe in what you hear in the media and let others know that that might be a lie. And organizing events like this whenever you can.
So we are actually going to wrap it up right now. We are going on 8 o'clock, but if people want to stick around for discussion afterwards in a more informal way, you are welcome to stay. But we do want to thank our friends from the Venezuela consulate for coming out, and then John for giving an excellent talk. About activities that are going on, or not activities, but things that are going on this week. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. at Federal Plaza, Answer Chicago will be joining postal workers and their allies for a rally to maintain Saturday mail and save the post office. So that's tomorrow at 3. Monday at 5:30, also at Federal Plaza, we will be joining a rally in support of same-sex marriage rights. The rally is part of a national day of action being held on the eve of the Supreme Court hearing 2 LGBT cases. So it's Monday, Federal Plaza, and then on Wednesday, there's a lot going on this week. On Wednesday at 4 p.m., join us in the Chicago Teachers Union, who will be having a massive march to stop the racist school closings in Chicago. The march will be assembling at Daly Plaza, and that's Wednesday at 4 p.m. And then next Saturday, that's the 30th, in this office, WORD, which stands for Women Organized to Resist and Defend, is holding a meeting to organize for a nationally coordinated Women's Spring of Action to stop the war on women's rights. So that'll be next Saturday, I believe at 6 p.m. I have 2 more. The Answer Coalition is co-sponsoring a very important event from April 5th to May 4th. It's entitled From My Altitude, Prison Artwork of Antonio Guerrero, one of the Cuban 5 political prisoners in U.S. jail. It will be shown at Calles y Sueños. I don't have the exact address, but you can look it up. It's definitely on the Answer page. 1900 Carpenter, it's in Pilsen. On Friday, April 5th, Gloria Lariva, one of the leaders of the Answer Coalition in San Francisco and the coordinator of the National Committee to Free the Cuban 5 will be speaking, so that'll be April 5th. And then on May 11th, the Party for Socialism and Liberation will be hosting a day of education in this office. There are leaflets in the back, on the back table if you're interested. And then also, not politically related, but it is Beth's birthday.
Tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow is Beth's birthday. So if you want to stick around, we have cupcakes and cookies to celebrate her birthday. So thank you everybody for coming out. It was a great evening. Stick around and talk and eat cupcakes.